Okay, good morning. Wanted to take a little bit of time to walk through what we do in our family for homeschool. Homeschool looks very different for just about each and every family. There's so much flexibility and customization within homeschooling that what one family does will often look very different from the way another family does. But the purpose of me making this video and then other videos that will be coming is to give new homeschoolers who do not have any real understanding of what homeschool looks like. I'd like to provide that understanding for what it looks like for us, and also just illustrate through hands-on examples how and why it's very, very different from public school. So I guess first and foremost, homeschool in most cases is not public school at home, and homeschool curricula is not designed to be a mirror image of whatever state and public school standards exist. That does not mean that it is not up to par. In many cases, most of the cases that I've seen in the curricula that I've chosen, the homeschool curricula is actually more advanced than public school. So I just, it's always good to just establish that public school is not the gold standard in terms of education. It's certainly adequate. I don't find fault with anybody that does choose public school. But for those that are interested in what homeschool may look like, I've got some stuff I'd like to show you today, and just want to put that out there with the caveat that homeschool is definitely not an inferior option to public school. So having said that, for this specific video, I wanted to touch on what we will be doing for math this coming year. My kids are going into 5th grade, and when I pulled them out of public school in the middle of 3rd grade, I gave them a placement test for a homeschool math program that is not this one sitting in front of you, but is also an advanced math program. And they could not place into that math program at grade level, even though their grades in public school were in the 90s. So that's just another just point of consideration when looking at homeschool math programs. That's just to understand that a lot of times what you find in homeschool math is going to be more advanced than public school, and therefore if you're pulling your child out, you're not just going to place them right away in whatever grade number is on the outside of a book cover. You need to give them a placement test to make sure that they can handle the material. It's more rare in homeschool that a child will place into a much higher level having come from public school math. It's more common, in fact very common, for kids to place a grade level or two below what the homeschool curriculum grade number is. So just good to know going into it. So what we are using this coming year for 5th grade is actually Math Mammoth grade 4. Now just because it says grade 4, it does not mean that we are behind. I am very confident that we're right where we need to be. Because this is an advanced math program. Math Mammoth completes in grades 1 through 7 what public school does in grades 1 through 8. So after completing grade 7 in Math Mammoth, kids are prepared to move on into algebra in 8th grade. Most public school students are starting algebra in 9th grade. So the number of years is condensed by 1 year, and every year that you move through the program, it tends to be more advanced than the levels that you find at public school. All right, so let me just give you a look at what Math Mammoth looks like. I purchased the PDFs because I've got 2 kids in the same grade and I have a really efficient printer. So I printed 2 copies of our materials for the year, but paid for 1 PDF. So that was a good way to save money. And I was able to buy a comb binding machine used off of Facebook Marketplace, and it came with all of these like plastic sheets and these comb bind things. I got that for a really, really good price. So I am now able to print and bind my own stuff at home, and it saves us some money. So anyway, Math Mammoth. Math Mammoth is a what would be called a conceptual math program. It's more styled after, many of the Asian math programs versus kind of the traditional old school American math programs. So it is a conceptual math program. It is also called a mastery math program. What that means essentially is that kids are going to focus, I'm just going to pop over to the table of contents. They're going to focus on one topic for several weeks, and they're not going to bounce around between topics. So they're going to do, for instance, only multi-digit multiplication for several weeks. They're going to keep building on their concept before they move on to another topic such as time and measurement. So that is mastery-based. In spiral-based math, you cover a little bit here in multiplication, and then the next day you cover a little bit in time and measuring. And so the approach is a little bit more scattered, but where spiral programs make up and have their strength is that there's a ton of review of previous learned concepts every single day. And I'd say better than 80% of every lesson is review. So that's really good because it doesn't give the kids an opportunity to forget what they've learned earlier in the year. In mastery-based programs, there is some review. Usually that spiraling back to previously learned concepts will occur within a word problem, unless you systematically put review into the math program, and I'll explain that in a minute. So anyway, Math Mammoth is a conceptual math program versus a procedural math program. Conceptual math programs seek to establish why the math works. Procedural math programs establish how to do the math. Both things are good. One is not better than the other, but I just feel like my kids are probably needing a more challenging math program and something that is a little bit more conceptual. So we're going to transition over from a spiral program to a mastery program and from a procedural program to a conceptual program this year. All right, so I've explained the differences between those concepts in homeschool math. In Math Mammoth, at the beginning of every chapter, there's going to be an introduction for the parent, and then there's going to be a breakdown for each lesson in the chapter, and then there are a number of links that are specific to the chapter. So there will be videos that will coordinate with the chapter topics, and then there will be games that are specific, and so you don't have to go to an online math game and figure out, okay, how do I tie all of this stuff that they're doing specifically to what we're learning right now. So the author of this curriculum has laid that out for you. What I really like is the videos that she's prepared. They're instructional videos on the major math topics. Those videos are free, so you don't have to pay for them. They're on YouTube, and if you buy her lesson plan, which I have bought, she matches up every single lesson with its specific video. If you don't buy her lesson plan, you have to figure that out yourself. Okay, so beginning of the chapter has a number of useful links that will help in with instruction and also with games and things. So once we get into, I'm going to pop right into it. Once we get into a lesson, at the top of every lesson is instruction. The instruction is written to the student. So older students like 4th and 5th grade should be able to read this and move through the lesson on their own, especially if they've been trained how to do it independently. They should be able to move through the lesson on your own, and so the parent's job in a program like this is just to make sure the work is getting done and that kids understand the concept. The way that you would measure that is just by checking in every so often to make sure that they're doing the problems correctly. The other way of doing it is you can just take this little instructional piece right here, go over it with your child, and then the child completes the lesson. Lessons are typically 2 to 3 pages long. Every once in a while there will be a 4-page lesson. So for 4th grade math in Math Mammoth, there's workbook 4A, there's workbook 4B. And then there's an optional, you would buy this separately, skills review workbook. I'm going to touch on this in a second. I did want to mention that buying the PDFs is more affordable, especially because you can reuse them with other children as other children come up through the years. But if you don't want to deal with printing and binding and all of that, you don't have to. You can actually buy these workbooks pre-printed, just like any other workbook that you would buy. And they are, a little bit nicer feeling because they're professionally printed, but they are a little bit more expensive, so you pay for that. And when you're done using it, you have to buy the curriculum again if you want to use it with other children. So, all right, so this is essentially what a 4th grade math student is going to complete in 1 year in Math Mammoth. And this is about what they would do every year, except I've been told the 7th grade level is quite a bit more work. It's pre-algebra, and it includes also quite a bit of review of all of the various arithmetic concepts to prepare them for pre-algebra, so it's a little bit more dense, and I'm told it's a pretty challenging year. But look, if your kids are coming up through this kind of program, they can do it. They can do it. So we've got workbook 4A and 4B. That's your first and second semester. You'll pace at about 2 to 3 pages a day. The author of the program does ask parents to not assign every single question, and the reason being that if they're getting it, you don't have to drill it to death. If they're not getting it, then you have extra problems left over that you can continue to assign for practice, either in throughout the rest of the chapter. If you just want to keep going back to make sure they've got it, you can do that. Or you can just stay on the lesson for a few days and keep practicing until you know that they've gotten it. So, so we don't assign every single question. She says start off with about half and use your judgment and scale up or down from there. Okay, so in earlier I mentioned something about systematic review of previously learned concepts. I decided to buy the skills review workbook. It was not expensive, for daily review of things the kids have already learned. So they'll do their lesson, and then every single day I'm going to assign, just in order, we'll move in order through this book, I'm going to assign 1/2 of a page of review of previously learned concepts. So they will continue to touch upon the things that they have already learned. They're not going to touch on every concept every day, but they're going to be touching on it frequently enough to keep it fresh. And 1/2 a page of review is really not that much. That's kind of how I'm establishing my comfort level in moving from a spiral math program to a mastery-based math program, is just to add in daily review. And I love that the curriculum designer for this has created these skills review workbooks as a flexible option for parents who do want that extra touch point with previously learned concepts. So that is Math Mammoth. I think it is an excellent program. It's very similar to a math program that's very well established and known throughout the world, really. And that's called Singapore Math. So it's very similar to Singapore Math. It's just a little easier to teach. And a little better organized, I think. It comes with the videos and the games, and Singapore Math does not. And it's more affordable than Singapore Math. So it's a great option. For kids that are going to be homeschooling only for a short period of time, maybe a year, and then going back into public school, this is a really excellent option because this program does include Common Core Math, which I know is kind of a hot button issue, but when you understand what it is, it's actually kind of cool. Before I understood what Common Core Math was, I was really kind of anti. I was like, why did they mess math up? There was nothing wrong with it. But now I see where they're going with it, and it is good. But this program actually exceeds Common Core standards. pretty significantly, actually. So if your child is going to be homeschooling for about a year, get them into the level that they test into, and know that they will probably be just fine when they step back into public school math. So long as you are doing your due diligence and checking their work every day or periodically throughout a lesson, that might be more difficult, conceptually, and you're just making sure that they've got it. If you're doing that, your kids are going to be fine. So that's where we're at with math. Up next, I'll be doing a video on science, so stay tuned.